Okay, the second method of finding federal withholding, like I said, instead of printing pages and pages and pages of tables, okay, you can do this method. Now, this is on page 225 in your book. So open up your book, page 225. Okay? Now, the first step, okay, everybody has these steps written down, correct?
Correct.
Okay, the first step you do is you determine the amount to subtract from gross earnings based on the number of allowances, okay? In the example in your book, example 3, the person in that example has 4 withholdings, meaning maybe they have 2 kids and a wife, okay, and they claim themselves. So they have 4 withholdings. So you can go over to the top table on page 225, and you're looking at the weekly pay, because this guy gets paid weekly, and whatever amount he gets to withhold per allowance. So it's $67.31, and he has 4 allowances. You multiply those together, and he gets to subtract $269.24 from his gross pay. He does not have to pay taxes on that. So go down step 2, subtract that amount. And $1305.76 is the taxable amount. If somebody ever asks for your adjusted gross earnings, that's all they're asking for. They're asking for your gross earnings minus your allowance or your deductions, your allowance deductions. Okay, your adjusted gross income. Okay, adjusted gross income with the adjustments taken out. There's a couple other things, but mainly the allowances are what gets taken out. There's a couple more things that you're allowed to deduct, but for right now, that's your adjusted gross income. Any questions? Then step 3, we're going to use the tables on the bottom. Below, I'm looking for a weekly payroll period. I'm looking for a married person weekly payroll period. So if you go to the table, on the right side of the table 1, I'm looking for the number that I subtracted, which was $1,305.76. In that table, it says that they have to pay $29.90 plus 15% of anything over $453. Okay? So all I did was write that formula out. It looks like this. It says, with the $1305.76, table says $29.90 plus 50% of anything over $453. So there's my formula, $29.90 plus 15%, and how do I find how much over $453 I make? Well, you subtract your AGI, or your adjusted gross income. Take your adjusted gross income and subtract out the $453, and that's the difference. And I believe that number is like 8. $852.76. So I'm going to take 15% times $852.76, and I get $127.91. Add that to the original $29.90, and his federal withholding, the state in 1 week, or I mean the federal government in 1 week, he has to pay $157.81. I multiplied that $852.76 by 15%. Okay, and I got $127.91. Any questions? Doing okay? Now, the only other thing that we need to talk about, okay, that we have not talked about at all is a state tax. Okay, now state tax is fairly easy. Okay, it varies from state to state, and in Ohio it varies from county to county. Okay, if you go to the Ohio website, you can pull up a tax table, and depending on what county, usually depends on your state tax, I believe. That's how they do it. Okay? It varies. Now, it's always just a percentage. Okay? Usually it varies anywhere between 2 and 4%. Okay? Okay? And, oh no, that's sales tax that varies.
Yeah.
State tax is just 1. It's just a...
That's for us 7%.
Okay, but that's sales tax. This is just, that doesn't come out. That's when you buy something. Okay? This is your income tax. Okay, that's sales tax. This is completely different. This is income tax. Income tax is usually a percentage. I'm not sure what Ohio's income tax rate is. Usually it's between 1 and 2%, sometimes 3% for states. Okay, so all you do is if the state tax is 3%, okay, you just take your gross amount times your state percentage, whatever the state percentage is, state tax percent, and that gives you your deduction. It's nothing complicated like the federal government does. It's just usually a percentage. Okay? Any questions? All right, this is what you're going to be doing on your homework. We're going to do 2 examples, or word problems. Okay? Find the net pay of a married person with 3 withholdings and a weekly gross pay of $643.35. Now, net pay, we haven't talked about what net pay stands for, so I'm going to give you the definition of net pay. Net pay is basically your take-home. Okay? In my own words, it's your take-home pay. It's your gross earnings minus your deductions. Okay? It's your gross earnings minus deductions. That's what your net pay is. So when we talk about gross pay, that's not your take-home pay. That's what you make, minus all the stuff you got to pay to the state, the federal government, Social Security, Medicare, insurance, state disability insurance. What's that?
There's stuff that they give me, it shows what all the places are doing.
Yep, they should show you each itemized deduction. And it should, yeah.
What do they show if you like put $10 on your W-4 to like take out of there and take that?
It'll just add it to whatever the other one is.
What is that? It's your gross minus deductions?
What's that?
I don't understand the pay stub, so I just look at the code. I'll take
You will here in a second. Right now we're going to do a pay
There's so
stub.
many different letters.
Right this second.
What's that gross minus deductions?
Yeah, gross pay minus deduction. Okay, so a net pay of a married person with 3 withholdings and a weekly gross pay of $643.35. Well, here we go. We got to take our gross pay and subtract out all our deductions. Well, what deductions do we have to figure out? That's my gross. What's the first deduction that we have to take out? Usually it's federal. Okay, I'm sorry, I guess I haven't told you. Yeah, we're going to have to take that one out. Usually it goes federal, state, Social Security, Medicare, state disability, IRA, or your 401k, whatever it is, okay, and it keeps going down. Usually they start with Fed. And usually on a pay stub, it'll say this, FED, federal. That means federal tax. Now, for this guy, how much does he have to, how much do we have to withhold? Well, if you need to find out, you can use the table or you can use the percentage method. I would recommend, since the table's in your book, look at the table and see if it's on there.
29.
How'd you find it?
With it 40 through 15 to 3
Okay.
withholding.
You went to the table on page 222 and 223. On page 222, at the bottom, because married weekly is on the bottom of page 222, you go down to $643.35, and he has 3 withholdings, and you get $29. Okay, everybody find that number? $29. So for this guy, the federal government for this paycheck is taking out $29. And I use the table for that. So if you want to make a note to yourself how I got that, we use the table. Okay? We didn't use the percentage method. We'll do that in the next one. Now, federal. Then usually state comes out. Okay? Usually state comes out. Okay? And sometimes on your pay stub, it'll actually have the state initials. So what's our state or your state,
Ohio.
we'll say OH. Okay, that means that's going to the Ohio government. Okay, so usually it's a percentage. We'll just say for this for Ohio, I'm not sure what it is. I should look it up. I'll just say 2%. Okay, so how much is this guy going to have to pay to the Ohio government? How do I find that?
0.0 times 0.02.
Yep, we're going to take 643.35 times 2%. 0.02. How much is coming out for state? Let's see. $12.87. $12.87. Good. After state, then usually comes Social Security, and usually on your pay stub, it says SS or it says FICA. FICA. FICA, Federal Insurance Contribution Act. Okay, how do I find the FICA? What's the FICA rate? Right now, it's 4.2, but technically, usually it's 6.2. In your book, it's 6.2, so we're just going to use 6.2. We're not going to update it so that you don't get confused. Okay? So in your paycheck, right now in your pay stub, it says 4.2. It's going to be 4.2%, but usually they just lowered it to try to give America a tax break. That was their tax break effort. Okay? But usually it's 6.2. Okay, so we're just going to use 6.2 because it'll probably go back up eventually. Okay, so take your gross times 6.2, so 643.35 times 6.2%. What do you get? What?
$39.89.
$39.89. After FICA, Medicare. Well, how much do we have to pay in Medicare? Usually Medicare is MED on your pay stub. Medicare will say MED.
1.2.
1.45. 1.45. So we take 643.35 times 1.45%. And what do you get? $9.33. Now, that's the minimum that's going to come out. Those four things always come out. Federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare. Sometimes, depending on what state you live in, you pay state disability, but we're not going to pay that for this one.
401.
And if you have a retirement account, 401k. And if you have a savings account, savings. The next one you guys are going to freak out. Okay, because that's usually how they look. Okay, so how do I find my net pay? Well, I like to add up my deductions and figure out how much am I really paying to all the government stuff. So take your 29 plus 1287 plus 3989 plus 933. Add them all up. And what do you get? What's the total deductions? $91.09 is going to the government. $100 out of your $600 paycheck goes to the government. Yeah. Okay. So how do I find my net pay? I take my gross minus my deductions. So I have 643.35 minus 91.09. Gross minus deductions. And what do you get? What's your take-home pay? Anybody? Do I have to do it? Come on. 643.35 minus 91.09. 552.26. Thank you. That is what you put in your bank account or spend or whatever you do with your money. That's the number you get.
I'd like to have that every week.
Yep, you're gonna dump that in gas probably. 100 of that's going to gas for that
That's
week.
good for every 2 weeks. That'd be a nice every 2 week paycheck.
Yeah, especially where you're at. Now, once you have 4 kids and a family, that's gonna be very important. Okay. Here's the one that's evil. This is actually one of your homework. This is what your homework's gonna look like. So turn to page 230 in your book. I'm going to do a homework problem for you. That way, you guys know how to get started. Okay? Here's what I do. Homework's right there. I always list over on the side everything, while I'm reading the problem, everything that's coming out. Okay? I start with my gross, I list everything that's coming out, and then I put net at the bottom. That's how I know that I have all my deductions accounted for. So while I'm reading the problem, I write them down. Okay? So let's read the problem number 35. This is a marketing representative. Doug Gilbert, marketing representative, has weekly earnings of $975. So I think to myself, okay, $975 a week. I write that down. That way I don't forget and have to keep looking for it. He is married and claims 4 withholding allowances. So what I always do is put 4M. That means 4 withholdings and he's married. So I can remember, I don't have to write it all out. 4 withholdings M. So I have all 4 pieces of information that I need. $975 weekly, 4M. Okay, then I keep going. Then I start jotting down what comes out. Okay, his deductions include FICA, Medicare, federal, state disability, state withholding, union dues, credit union savings. Find his net pay for this week in February. Okay, so I went ahead and I listed them. Now I put mine in a different order. I do it usually in the order of what it is on your pay stub. So I have federal, state, Social Security, Medicare, state disability, union, and savings. I have them all listed down the side. Then I go ahead and figure out each one. Now I'm going to do.
How do you find semi-monthly?
Hold on just a second. I'm going to give myself a little more room for federal. Take it. Semi-monthly? What do you mean?
Like in your chart?
You're not given a chart for semi-monthly. I don't know. I have to look. Hold on. Okay, we're doing number 35 right now. My gross pay. I'm going to start out with my gross, so I'm going to go ahead and write gross pay $975 up here at the top. Okay, just so that I know that's my gross pay. Federal pay. Now, is $975 in the chart on page 222 and 223? Can I use that chart for weekly married? Does it go that high? No, so I have to use the other method. Okay? We don't have a chart that goes that high, so we have to use the other method. Okay? This is when you have to use it. So, what's the first step? Think, okay, step 1, I need to find out how much to subtract based on his 4 withholdings. So look at your chart on page 225. At the top, he gets paid weekly. How much do you get to subtract out per withholding? $67.31. So you're going to take that $67.31, and how many withholdings does he have? 4, and multiply by 4. $269.24. Then I take that number and subtract that number from my gross pay. So I take my gross pay, $975, minus my $269.24, and what do I get? $705.76. That's my adjusted gross. I take my adjusted gross, go back to the tables at the bottom, and find weekly married table. I think it's at the top, table 1. Weekly married. Okay, page 225. Weekly married. Okay, we have to use a percentage method. You can't use the tax brackets because it doesn't go high enough. Weekly married, $705.76. What does it say after that? Anybody? Look at the right, table 1, weekly married, find where $705.76 fits in. $29.90 plus 15% of anything over $453, right? You see that? Anybody not find that? Okay, so write that down. We have $29.90 plus 15% of anything over $453. So I take my 705.76 minus 453. 76 minus, so you take it minus 453. 252.76. Take that times 15%. So 37.91 plus 29.90. $67.81. Is that what everybody got? Okay, so he has to pay $67.81 to the federal government out of that $975. Okay. Now, state withholding. Well, if you look on page 230 where the problem is, up in the top of the directions, what does it tell me my state withholding is? What percentage? 3.4%. So I'm going to take my, okay, that's what I found in the problem, and the directions. So I have to take my gross pay, which is $975, is that what it was?
Yeah.
$975 times my 3.4%, and you get, what does it comes out for a state? $33.15 goes to the state government. Social Security. How do you find Social Security? Like Social Security. What? How much? What? 6.2%. Okay, so I have 6.2% for Social Security. So I take 975 times 6.2% and $60.45. Medicare. Well, what's the percentage for Medicare? 1.45. So I take 975 times 1.45%. 1414. State disability. That one is a new one. Disability insurance. In the problem, it tells you how much we pay for state disability up at the top of the directions. Right, 1%. If you look on page 230, in the directions, it says state disability, they pay a 1%. So I take my 975, multiply it by 1%, you can do that in your head, $9.75. You can do the decimal. How much goes to the union? $15.50. So we got to pay $15.50 for union dues. What happened here? Then how much did he save? $25. $25. It says no problem. Both of those are given. Now, find your total deductions. So we're done deducting. Add them all up. How much money is coming out of this guy's paycheck? Maybe you guys will know why I cried when I got my first paycheck. $67.81 plus $33.15 plus $60.45 plus $14.14 plus $9.75 plus $15.50 plus $25. And that doesn't even include retirement. A lot of money comes out.
Put your retirement fund, stick the money in a shoebox, put it in the freezer.
Good luck with that. Anybody got the total? We have the total deduction. Kirsty's working on it. By the way, I'm telling these are dollars. They want this. $225.80, is that what we got? $225.80 of the money that you work for is out the door every week.
That's crazy.
Isn't that insane?
How much time do you get back?
How much do you get back?
Yeah.
Probably not much.
I hate life.
You claimed everything. You might actually have to pay.
I hate life.
So to find out how much you get to take home out of $975, you subtract your $225.80. And what, after making $975, what do you get to take home and even spend? $749.40.
Not even worth working.
Pretty much depressing, isn't it?
Oh, man.
Alright, number 36. That's the month.
Okay, we'll look at that too. Any questions? Well, let's look at number 36 for your homework. It says her semi-monthly income is $1,835 before deductions for FICA, Medicare. Okay, well, what happens is on your tables, it doesn't show semi-monthly, does it?
Right.
So what method do you have to use? Percentage method. So you got to go to page 225, use the semi-monthly withholdings, and then go down to table 3 and use the semi-monthly payroll. Okay, so for number 36, you have to use the percentage method. Okay? That's the hard one. All right, you only have 3 problems. They're all word problems, like the one we just did. Okay? They're page 230, 36, 38, and number 40. I'm going to come around and grade your homework that you did today. So just leave it sitting out. I'll be out around in about a minute. Okay? Get started on these. Try to get a couple done.